So the numbers on the heart are just arbitrary. You don't like reach a.
You need the 3 keys
to the heart.
To the heart.
I don't understand that.
13 bottles of beer on the wall. Hey, 13 bottles of beer. Hey, take one down. You pass it around. It's
17
I think 12. Gotta just carry the 4.
Guys,
wait, we start over. Guys.
Oh,
fuck.
Guys.
All right, Cecil.
Guys, what are you doing?
I love you, man. He, shut up. Cecil's here.
Cecil's here. What's up?
His gym teacher made up his name. What are you guys doing?
No, look at you. You're such a little guy. Like you're just like a little man. He's like a little man. Look, come over here. Get over here.
So we saw this episode. It was about bottles of beer.
We did.
So
we saw that.
We did it.
We're gonna do it. We are gonna do this.
Yep.
We are. Hell yeah. Fucking right.
Okay. I vomited a little bit.
Wow. You even vomit aggressively.
You vomited a lot. It's a lot more than mine.
No, it's not even a lot yet. It's not. I'll tell you when it's a lot.
This is very aggressive.
Just,
Yeah, do a fucking accent, whatever. Wild card, see?
Cecil, you might want to beep that.
Oh, yep. Totally way ahead of you.
Okay, guys. My essay today is about bottled beer, like the history of bottled beer. It's about Dutch merchants and the longer form of fermentation.
Oh my God.
Introduced by hops.
Oh.
All right. Yeah.
Worth it.
Still worth it.
Yeah, it was. Worth it. It is.
You see that show on YouTube? You see that? Tom.
I did.
Tom.
I did.
Tom.
Yeah.
You see the show on YouTube? They eat the food?
I did. I saw the show on
Do
YouTube.
they eat it?
I did. Which one?
We should do that.
We should start a YouTube channel.
Yes,
Why don't we have a YouTube channel?
This is it right now. We're doing it. This is the show. This is our first episode.
I had an idea for a YouTube show if we're going to...
Eli, not the time. No. Not the time, Eli.
Okay.
You can finish that?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to finish that.
This is
mine.
It's a whole Cheeto.
But you can share it. It's all right. There's a lot.
I want all of it.
Hello and welcome to Citation Needed, the podcast where we choose a subject, read a single article about it on Wikipedia, and pretend we're experts, because this is the internet and that's how it works now. I'm Cecil, and I'll be driving on this road trip, but I won't be making the journey alone, so let me introduce our cast. First up, a guy whose favorite road food is 2 rotisserie chickens that he wears like mittens, and the other whose favorite is, do you have that in vegan? Tom and Eli.
Chicken mittens are going to be my legacy, Cecil. Thank you very much. That's going to be my thing. You know, like when I'm dead and gone in 3 years, like people all over the world, they're going to like remember. They're going to be like, that is the way to fist a chicken.
Yeah.
I'm going to jail.
I like to ask barbecue places in the Deep South what they have that's vegan loudly, right before Heath orders, and is very clearly with me. This is what I enjoy.
I'm never with him.
That's why I look.
I bring one of those supermarket dividers to block me and Eli.
And also joining us is a guy who won't consume anything that hasn't been barrel aged for at least 12 years, and another who hasn't never been hungry enough to eat in a car, Heath and Noah.
All right, well, you guys made fun of me, but those craft singles were oaky. Like, great. Nice and oaky. 12 years later, cheese.
All right, for what it's worth, Cecil, calories are just units of heat. If you stay pissed off enough, you can subsist off your own rage, as it turns out.
It's true.
That's fair. That's why you're 600. All right, so patrons, you make sure we have all the complex carbs we need to power through these late night recording sessions. Thank you. And if you'd like to give us money to buy food, which I will point out is essential for a few of us cast members, be sure to stick around till the end of the show. And with that out of the way, tell us, Heath, What person, place, thing, concept, phenomenon, or event will we be talking about today?
All right. In honor of episode 100, we're going to be talking about bottles of beer.
But isn't it 99 bottles of beer on the wall?
This was not my first choice, Cecil, but I was concerned about my mom's safety. So, which had nothing to do with Tom, just like general concern. Right. She's old, so I was worried about her.
Oh, all right. Well,
you want her to stay old.
But whatever happened, you actually wound up choosing an interesting topic. So tell us about bottles of beer.
All right. So Wikipedia defines a bottle as, quote, a narrow-necked container made of an impermeable material, glass, plastic, aluminum, etc., in various shapes and sizes to store and transport liquids. Then it gives a list of liquids in case that category seems vague to you.
If you're wondering why they give a list of liquids, it's because I just kept tagging citation needed next to the word liquids, and the pedantic nerds at Wikipedia are easy to trick. It's a fun game you can play.
We fucking started a topic with beer, which is awesome, and we detoured immediately to defining what a bottle is, just in case any of our listeners' life support has been removed before they downloaded the show, so they can relate.
The subject isn't beers of bottles, Tom. There is an order to these things.
No, just for you. Just for you.
Anyway, some of the earliest bottles were made by the Chinese, Phoenicians, and Etruscans.
No, I don't even care if the fucking Etruscan part is true. That is your second Etruscan strike. That's two.
It's not true.
I didn't think it.
I feel like if it was, it's actually a history hat trick at that point. I have to throw in hats from a few different continents and eras onto the ice. You know?
All right. So beer, on the other hand, is a urine-flavored beverage that masks its relative lack of palatability by intoxicating the consumer just enough to make piss taste fine. Now, beer aficionados will often argue that beer is merely an acquired taste, but in truth, the term acquired taste is just a euphemism for the fact that eventually your taste buds give up on sounding the, hey man, you're drinking piss alarm.
Yeah. Okay, audience, we can rest easy knowing that this has been settled by the complex palate of a smoker who orders off the kids menu.
Precisely because it's important not to acquire tastes as we age, which is why all the world's finest culinary minds are 8-year-olds.
Hey, you show me something that tastes better than tater tots and ketchup, and I'll eat something other than tater tots and ketchup.
I will show you hundreds of things that are better than tater tots and ketchup, if only you would eat one of them.
Yeah, Noah's in charge of the beer episode. His Boilermaker is a Mountain Dew and a shot of nicotine vape liquid. I don't know if this is lining up correctly.
All right. I mean, I don't want to pile on here, but Noah, why do you insist on alienating our urine-drinking audience member? What did Bill do to you? Huh? Except support us? Send us those photos?
Yeah, but more importantly, Noah, whose amazing urine are you drinking all the time?
I do want some.
Okay,
I get a bottle right after the show.
You guys say all of this now, but when it came time to put your money where your mouth was in the blind glass of beer versus glass of my piss taste test challenge, you all declined. Okay. I have that on record.
I didn't win. I didn't decline.
All right, so there are plenty of competing stories about who first invented beer and how, but in truth, the invention of beer is far too old for us to tease it out of the historical record. What's more, because almost any cereal that contains the right sugars can easily undergo spontaneous fermentation due to wild yeasts in the air, it was probably invented independently all over the world by pretty much every society that domesticated a cereal grain.
That's why he was so cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Oh, yeah. The Trix Rabbit had the DTs. It explains everything.
Right? Hipsters everywhere right now are busily forcing their friends to try their awesome Cheerios Pale Ale. And I will add as an aside, like when I was into beer brewing, I would go to beer tastings, and I seriously had a guy throw an entire pie in the fermenting tub, and I was like, "This tastes weird," and he's like, "I made it on top of a blueberry pie, just because he could." Yeah, it was. You're not. We're still doing this now, is what I'm saying. We're still doing this now.
What an asshole.
Right.
Yeah, waste of pie.
Blueberry pie PA.
All right, so in early human history, people didn't really drink beer for the taste or even for the intoxicating effect. Beer remained a staple beverage largely because, unlike standing water, beer was inhospitable to disease-causing bacteria. So they literally turned to beer because their water had poop in it.
Old-timey Noah was like, guys, I've been tasting lots of poo recently. It's a thing I do. And this water is a lot like the stuff I've been trying. Can we make something better than that? So the pee I've been trying is much nicer, to be honest. Maybe something like that. Just first off the top of my head, pee maybe flavor.
All right, so this is actually way more significant than a lot of people realize. So like today we take unpooped in water for granted, but back in the day, human expansion was limited to how far we could take water without getting it pooped in.
Yeah, because at some point the temptation to shit in the water jug is just too much. Like,
well, the poop particles that are floating through the air settle in it is what I mean.
I did it again. You guys keep telling me
we've
not
been
to.
walking all day.
I did it.
Okay, wait, you try not to shit in the water jug.
That's a weird board game.
So-
Can I say that?
Did it again.
Weird is in the eye of the beholder. All right, but the point is that humans had to settle near sources of clean water, and while you could toss that water in a jar or a hide bag or something for a day's journey, you couldn't ship water into the next town over consistently enough for them to survive. The water would get poop in it. Beer, on the other hand, made the potable portable. Some anthropologists actually consider beer to be on par with the discovery of bread in terms of its impact on human expansion.
Yeah, those are two big factors in my human expansion. Definitely.
What we're saying is yeast is an underrated MVP. He's part of all
Right,
that.
yeah,
He's in on all of us.
What I admire right now about human beings is that we invented beer before we invented boiling stuff. I'm just like, I gotta solve this problem.
We've been like practically everything else. Now, I should note that modern beer drinkers probably wouldn't care much for beer's early stuff. In reference to ancient beers in Mesopotamia, the Wikipedia article says, quote, "These beers were often thick, more of a gruel than a drink, and drinking straws were used by the Sumerians to avoid the bitter solids left over from fermentation," end quote. Needless to say, that chunky style beer has largely fallen out of favor with modern audiences, though. They don't like the curd.
Hey, hon, while you're up, can you bring me back a hunk of beer from the fridge?
That stuff is called trub, and it's basically exactly like if beer picked its nose and then you ate it. That's
Like fruit on the bottom yogurt, but beer. That doesn't sound good. Corona should do that with limes. That would be cool.
Oh, there you go. All right. So the oldest known evidence of brewing dates back to about 7,000 years ago in modern day Iran, in the form of chemical tests they did on ancient pottery jars. And that's pretty much as old as it can go, right? So like there are doubts that any evidence would even survive longer than that. So pretty much as far back as we can rewind time, there's beer. In fact, by the time the Mesopotamians got around to inventing writing, they already had 3 dedicated beer goddesses. Ninkasi was the goddess of brewing. They also had Ceres, who was the goddess of finished beer.
Wait. That's obnoxious. Like the goddess of finished, the goddess of empty.
No, like finished brewing, I mean.
She's got a coaster on her head as her idol.
And then they also had Siduri, who was the goddess of drinking beer.
Yeah, they went by 3 girls, 1 mug. That was their...
I mean, but have you seen those goddesses? They had to invent beer goggles just to get through a morning at church. Jesus Christ.
All right, so interesting side note, by the way, on Mesopotamian beer, we actually have a recipe. So the oldest evidence of beer drinking in the region comes from 6,000-year-old tablets that show a bunch of people drinking beer through straws out of a communal bowl. That's a method of consumption that Tom would later dub Daddy's Cheerios. There's also a poem that's about 4,000 years old, written in honor of the aforementioned goddess of brewing, in which the actual method of making their beer from barley and bread is described in detail.
Step 1, grains go in poop water. When it's bad, it's good. The end.
You know, there's some D-bag beer hipster waving a mug of this garbage in front of his face. You know, he's like, you can just smell the wet bread notes if you do this,
Whatever. I find microbrewing too commercial. I'm like, only into the original recipe Mesopotamian beer fermented with the wild yeast harvested from the neckbeard of a virgin. I use mine.
Yeah.
Right.
Probably use mine for a long time.
You got those suspenders because you worked at TGI Fridays. Stop being a dick.
So people were drinking beer as long as we can trace, but as near as we can tell, the Greeks were the first to be prudes about it, and the Romans were the first to be highfalutin dicks about it, thus confirming their historical stereotypes to such an absurd level that I might as well have just said that the Irish were the first to fill a swimming pool with it, and the Japanese were the first to fuck it.
True story. The Jews were the first to hoard it.
And the Irish were the first to fill a swimming pool with it.
Well, that is true. That is true, actually, yeah. But yeah, by 450 BCE, noted Greek writer Sophocles was urging his fellow Greeks to exercise moderation in consuming beer, though he still believed it to be an essential part of this balanced breakfast. The Romans drank beer as well, but it was often derided as a lower class version of wine and was frowned upon by the upper crust, even if you did get it from a microbrewery.
Look at these plebeians and their beer. Okay, I'm done vomiting. Let's go take a communal shit and go home to fuck our sons, huh?
All right, sounds fun. I call first wipe with the communal sponge.
Oh,
I call
first
it. You want to go swapsies on the kids this time?
No.
Come on.
You keep asking that.
What?
Man.
I don't like your son.
I have an ugly child.
All right, so but despite the Romans being dicks about it, beer continued to be a staple beverage throughout Europe right up to the modern day. And that brings us to medieval Europe. Okay, so medieval Europe is hard to even picture in your mind without a tankard of beer showing up in the foreground somewhere, right? And actually, this is pretty historically accurate because those motherfuckers drank the shit out of some beer. There is a persistent myth that people in medieval Europe drank more beer than water. That's almost certainly not even close to true. While beer was lauded for its poopless nature, water was way cheaper, and medieval villages were always built around ready water sources anyway.
I do feel like we should clarify, though, that this beer wasn't so much poopless since it was made from poop water. It's just that the poop had now been rendered safe, so
right,
kind of like sucking a turd up through a life straw. That's just...
I bought one of those.
Come see the feculence inherent in the system.
Of course, despite the fact that water was cheaper and more abundant, there's almost no question that the beer at the time was healthier due to the aforementioned pooplessness or the, whatever, negated poopfulness. Or I should say that there's no question of that today, because back then, the pre-scientific scientists derided beer mostly because they were relying on books written by ancient Greeks and Arabic physicians for whom beer was just something filthy foreigners drank. In 1256, the Aldobrandino of Siena, whatever the fuck that is, I think it's a person, described beer as follows, quote, "It harms the head and stomach. It causes bad breath and ruins the teeth. It fills the stomach with bad fumes, and as a result, anyone who drinks it along with wine becomes drunk quickly."
Along with wine?
Well, I mean,
right? Yeah. His assessment wasn't all bad, though. He did admit, quote, "It does have the property of facilitating urination."
Wait. So they weren't peeing from other liquid at this point? What was happening?
Oh, he also says it makes one's flesh white and smooth. End quote.
Okay. All of that might be accurate, but I think he forgot to mention that it also gives men the delightful ability to grow a belly of such wild proportions as to mimic the third trimester of gestating triplets. So this is really about promoting gender equality.
Well,
Thank
if
you.
you think about it.
I'm not that much into pea sports, but I'm not sure about it making flesh white. It might make it smell like asparagus, but I'm not sure that's a white thing.
And anecdotally, as a cast, we are all white in the order of beer consuminess.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
You're translucent.
No.
What are you talking
No,
about?
not quite, Eli.
Do you think you're tan?
No, because I'm like
What color do you think you are?
Like
name the color.
Idris Elba.
There's nothing
right.
about you.
Eli's brain is fascinating.
All right, so it's around this time that beer starts to take on its modern form. The first record of hops being added to beer starts cropping up in the early 9th century in Europe, though it was only gradually adopted because it was tricky to establish the right proportion of ingredients. Instead, most brewers used gruit, which was a mix of various herbs that flavored the beer, but it didn't have the same preservative properties as hops, so a lot of the beer they were brewing back then would spoil before it could be exported.
Okay, genuine question. How can you tell when alcohol goes bad?
When you run out. That's when you're out.
All right, same question, but this time about vegan shepherd's pie. How do you know?
See?
When you
Fair.
have some.
Right, when you run in. So yeah, beer was there for it all.
It saw the very earliest agrarian societies. It was there for the dawn of the written word. When the Sumerians built their great ziggurats, they paid their workers in beer. When the Egyptians built the pyramids, they did it shit-faced on a ration of 4 to 5 liters of beer a day.
Yes.
Nice.
When Xenophon outwitted his Persian stalkers, he stopped off for some Armenian beer along the way. And all the while, the bottle was also expanding its reach. But it wasn't until the 1440s that the two would come together and the partnership immortalized in song was born.
All right, Tom, wake up, big guy. Time to get your shoes on, buddy. We're at apropos of nothing. Come on, Tom.
Oh my God, what are the Etruscans up to? What do we got to do with the Etruscans?
Fuck you.
I say, Sir Reginald, it is a lovely day for a joust.
Indeed, Sir Aberforth.
Beer, fresh beer,
Ooh, vendor, how much for a beer?
$12.
That sounds about right.
Do you have smooth or only chunky?
Oh, only chunky, I'm afraid. But I have a filter straw.
I don't know. I don't want to be the chap drinking beer with a straw.
Indeed. I say, what if you bought 2 and put one on either side of your crown?
On my crown, you say?
Yes. And then you place your filter straws here and then here.
My goodness, I could have 2 beers.
You could. And then if anyone made fun of you, you could be like, come on, what? This is
Come on. Exactly. Yeah.
Helmet.
Right.
All right, you've convinced me. 2 beers and 2 straws, please.
All right.
Do you have change for a horse?
Ooh. No.
And we're back, and Heath is desperately rummaging through his junk drawer for 2 straws and a crown. So, Noah, tell us about OG Smokey and the Bandit.
I had that stuff ready.
Will do. All right. So through most of human history and up through the Middle Ages, beer brewing was done on a relatively small scale. There were exceptions, of course, but early beer didn't travel well. And because they weren't using hops yet, it had a high rate of spoilage. But that would start to change when hopped beer was perfected in the 13th century in Bohemia.
13th century Noah is just like, the real V Bohem is about careful preservation of sanitary
Boo,
liquids.
Nerd. Fuck a dude right now. Boo.
Now, it's about this time that Germans started to realize that future podcasters would make it all the way to the other end of apropos of nothing before actually mentioning their country and a history of beer. So they took beer brewing to a whole new level. Home brewing started to fall away in favor of medium-sized operations of 8 to 12 people, and they started creating infrastructure for export, like standardized barrel sizes. By the 14th century, this method of brewing had made it to Flanders and Holland, and by the early 15th century, it reached England. But because the English are stubborn fucks, they also kept drinking the unhopped beer alongside it, which they distinguished at this point as ale.
Yeah, this stuff from the rest of Europe, it's great. But is there any way to make it tepid and flavorless? That'd be great.
Nice job on the beer, mate. Can you do that with literally all our food, too?
I can.
Oh, great. And now let's deport all the dentists and then conquer the world while wearing silly hats. This is going to last forever, chap. Forever.
You wouldn't have thought that plan was going to work. At that moment, you wouldn't have thought it was going to work. Now, this is another part of the history that a lot of half-assers get wrong. There's a famous story about how it was illegal to put hops in beer in England at this time. That's not true. Okay, there was a stupid law at the heart of the myth, though. They made a whole thing about keeping ale and hopped beers separate to the point that you weren't even allowed to brew them in the same locations. So people often quote the law against using hops in an ale house as though it were a restriction on brewing beer with hops at all.
Yeah, and hops had to use a different entrance and a separate but equal drinking fountain, too.
Well, what about if you just use 3/5 the amount as in a white ale? That's
Of course, beer with hops was just demonstrably better than the flat shit the Brits were holding on to. So eventually the term ale just came to mean strong beer, though snooty people of today try to pretend that there's a genuine distinction so that the rich Roman wine drinkers won't look down on
And
them.
everything sounds better on vinyl. Fuck you. No, it doesn't.
I know, ridiculous. And all pot's the same, and so is all food. So yeah, let's just move on.
You go too far, sir. You go too far.
To be fair, though, if you dislike everything equally, then everything is equal.
Amen.
Football is stupid.
Boo.
It is.
Yeah, it is. It's dumb.
It is dumb. I mean,
No,
I
it's
like to
dumb.
watch it. But
It's fun to
dumb.
watch, but
Yeah,
it's
no,
super dumb. Don't play
It's
football.
Why do we let
really
kids
dumb.
do it?
We should not do that.
Because we're dumb.
We shouldn't let adults do it either because they murder their families. There's a lot of people who shouldn't play football.
Yeah, right. All right. So, interesting side note on this. In 1516, William IV, the Duke of Bavaria, adopted something called, I'm going to get this way wrong, but the Reinheitsgebot, which, in a sense, that's probably right, actually.
That's not
is
bad,
the
actually.
oldest continuously enforced food regulation in the world. It was a
Really?
dictate that would later be passed into formal German law in 1987 that restricted the ingredients of beer to water, barley, and hops. Now, yeast was added in 1857 because that's when they discovered it. But yeah, almost 400 years before Upton Sinclair had to be like, hey, guys, there's the dude in your baloney. The Germans had already
And he had a
made
first
good damn
name.
Sure.
He had a first
Yes,
name.
right. Yeah, hey, dude, Javier. Yes, right. But goddamn it, when you ordered beer in Germany, you got beer.
Yep. If only German lampshade makers had the same standards, we'd all be.
that's
Oh, what? Don't you think that all those guys ordered Jews?
oh God,
Jesus.
that's a
Is this
myth. That's a
Romani?
myth.
Is this
We
a
know that's
Romani
myth.
in my fucking lampshade right now? Are you kidding me?
Feel how soft this is. This is Italian.
Does that feel that feels okay?
Of course, one of the consequences of this radical increase in production was an offsetting radical increase of consumption. According to one estimate, for example, the city of Hamburg went from drinking an average of 300 liters of beer per person per year in the 1400s to about 700 in the 1600s. Again, that's an average. Seeing as how at least some of them didn't drink, it's safe to assume that more than half of the city's populace was drinking more than a half gallon of beer a day.
Holy shit.
All right.
At this point, I should explain to the listener that when I first wrote this essay, it had a 2-track thing going where I went into the history of bottles on the one hand and the history of beer on the other, and I kind of hopped back and forth between the two and how they influenced each other. But Tom kept...
Hopped. Classic. Beer pun.
Thank you.
Nailed it.
Tom kept accidentally erasing the parts about the history of bottles.
Very
so
purposeful. Did that on purpose. I
now they
sent you
have
a
to
note
basically
saying I'm deleting this.
Accidentally erased the thing. So now they have to show up in the story fully formed as though created through divine intervention. No, it just went straight from Etruscans to beer. But regardless, this is where those two stories
Are
converge.
you fucking serious? We lost the whole Jamestown section? Tom, you are tearing this podcast apart.
The only history of bottles that I'm willing to listen to better involves champagne and a woman about to have a terrible yeast infection. Now I'm interested in bottles.
Tom would have some really weird citation needed episodes if there wasn't for the checking purposes. Now, there's a common apocryphal story of the first bottled beer showing up around 1570 at the hands of a forgetful Church of England rector named Dr. Alexander Noel. And this happened apparently in the impossibly Britishly named town of Hertfordshire, around 20 miles north of London. The story goes that he put some beer in a bottle so that he'd have a refreshment while he was out fishing, but then he fell asleep on the trip. He forgets about the beer. He never drinks it. He goes home. A couple of days later, he comes back to fish in the same spot, and damn if he doesn't come across the beer, which is now all fizzed up with fizziness and beeriness.
Yeah, that's how we figured out how stem cells has interesting properties too. We just left an abortion bottle in a lake. That's what,
It was Brew Radley, maybe. And a giant shark baby jumps out of the water and eats Samuel L. Jackson. It was adorable. It was an adorable experiment.
So the idea is that the beer had undergone secondary fermentation in the bottle, which makes for a much higher quality beer than people would have been used to in the 16th century. And because people love the idea that maybe they too could bumblefuck their way onto a great and lasting discovery, the story is enduring even if it doesn't have any documentation behind it at all. Right, the first telling of the story, as near as we can tell, comes from a dubious source more than 100 years after the story was said to have taken place.
And all the beer nerds right now are just shaking their heads at this crazy idea that you'd even get secondary fermentation sufficient for the dissolution of a reasonable amount of CO2 in just a few days. And they don't even get started on the dubious presence of sufficient quantities of fermentable sugars after the primary fermentation phase is complete. How would you even have sufficient bottling pressure with old-timey bottles, with old-timey seals? It's
but one mention
I don't want to
of
get too far.
fucking Etruscans, and all of a sudden I'm a nerd.
Had that coming.
Labaticus Finch. That was earlier from a joke.
No, that was
I said
good. That
Brew
was good.
Radley,
Yeah, Brew
but then now
Radley.
Labaticus.
Yeah.
Labaticus Stout Finch. What?
All right, so in truth, the story of bottled beer is even more boring than the Noel myth. Bottles had been around for a long fucking time, glass ones at that, and people put wine in them already, so why wouldn't you just put beer in them? Sure, the secondary fermentation thing probably got discovered by accident, and that probably happened several times in different locations, but it almost certainly happened at breweries. That being said, it likely didn't happen as early as the legend would suggest, since, as Tom alluded to, the hand-blown glass bottles of the day would not have been strong enough to withstand the pressure of the CO2 anyway.
Just a guy with shards of glass lodged all over his face. He's like, there must be a better way, but I don't care. We're doing this. We're making these.
And the fucking delivery guy is just like shaking and sweating profusely as he carries bottles of beer basically filled with nitroglycerin around a storeroom.
So as near as I can tell, bottled beer shows up in the early 17th century mostly as something the rich folks are doing. Again, likely because it seemed more upper crust to drink alcohol out of a bottle, not because of secondary fermentation. Bottles were pretty expensive at the time, so most beer was still fermented in barrels, and you can still find documents of brewers arguing about which method was better well into the 1600s. So well into the 1700s, bottled beer remains an upper crust luxury.
As I said in my last missive to @Beermaster44, he knows nothing of the brew.
There's that one guy that insists on drinking out of a single serving barrel.
Right. That same asshole has a barrel in every shape in his house and insists it tastes different if you drink it from the tulip barrel or whatever. Twat.
He's got a slotted spoon around his neck like a sommelier, just eating the chunks.
So that started to change a bit in the 18th century. And one interesting reason that contributed to that was the lack of glass blowers in the American colonies. Apparently, we weren't set up to make all the bottles we needed for everyday bottling. So a large percentage of the bottles people used in America had to be shipped over from England. And if you're going to ship bottles anyway, you might as well double dip and fill them with something valuable. And because of secondary fermentation, you can basically fill a bottle with flat beer on one side of the Atlantic and end up with frothy beer on the other side. So it was a logical choice when it came time to fill those bottles.
Seems like that was a weird meeting.
All right, gentlemen, we must decide once and for all what goes into our bottles.
My lord, the secondary fermentation process of bottled beer makes it the natural choice.
Boo, nerd, pee. We're doing pee.
Oh, yes, pee.
I like that too.
Yeah.
Why would we send pee?
Well, we can't send empty bottles.
Empty bottles.
It's ridiculous. Of course, it's
No,
ridiculous.
But empty bottles would be better than pee.
Gentlemen, please. Now you've both presented some good ideas. The board will vote all in favor of this beer thing.
Seriously, it's just me.
Pipe down and pee then. All right, well, it's decided.
Huzzah!
Pee.
Urine.
Bernard Sanders 2020.
Of course, these bottles were all still hand blown, so
Hot.
they were time consuming as hell to make. Some glass bottles were made from clay and copper molds, but they tended to make for shitty end products. But then, in 1847, an American brewer was granted a patent for iron bottle molds.
What?
A couple decades later, yeah, right, the chilled iron mold was invented and made bottles orders of magnitude faster and cheaper to produce.
Fun fact, chilled iron mold is still a favorite at British potlucks too.
Oh, I can't even think of anything more desperate sounding than a British potluck.
Right?
Oh, bad to start with.
All right, so one problem still stood between the beer and the bottles, though, and that was the cork. While the process of making glass bottles had moved from skilled craftsmen to mass production, they still needed to be corked by hand. And I saw a record of a London brewer back in 1870 that had to employ 100 corkers plus and work them in 12-hour shifts.
Hey, 1870 Cecil.
I swear to God, 1870s, Eli. Do not say
Put
it.
a cork in it.
That is it. That's it.
All right, so also worth noting, by the way, corks were a pain in the ass on both sides of the beer. Beer drinkers have enough trouble cracking open pop-top cans at a certain point, right? You just imagine a dude trying to fit a corkscrew into his sixth beer.
There's easier ways to get someone to stop drinking. Just hide the liquor under their work clothes. That's what we used to do with my dad. So,
That did not work with my dad. Just to be clear.
All right, so in a real testament to how classy bottled beer is, it was the patent of the first twist-on cap that really allowed bottled beer to take off and become a mainstay of beer consumption. That happens in the late 1800s, but bottled beer really didn't take off until World War I, when bars got into the habit of watering down the kegs to make up for wartime taxes.
And if anything will finally get the South to stop supporting wars, this is it.
another fun fact, World War I also popularized twist off limbs. That was good at.
That's just like some kid aspirating his own fucking lung juice in a trench at the Somme in his last gasp. It's just, it's okay, just so long as they don't invent Blue Moon. His death was for nothing.
Yeah.
That was pointless.
So many.
Not slicing fucking oranges before every shift. God damn it.
The orange does not make it better.
Get a
Does
fucking
not.
lemon or
Does
get a
not.
beer that's made of beer, you asshole.
That is the worst. Blue Moon
Jesus.
is
I
the
like to go
worst.
over and throw out all the orange slices and then pretend it was an accident.
I like to do it right in their face and pretend it was on purpose. Not pretend. It's on purpose.
Anyone that orders a Blue Moon should be able to break it against the bar and cut him once. That should be standard.
What?
All right.
Escalated fast. Okay.
So, yeah, right? So that, of course, brings us around to the song that inspired the episode. Incorrectly, but still, my mom's fine, and that's what matters. That delightfully long ditty about ritual suicide via alcohol poisoning that we sing to our children on car trips and school excursions. 99 bottles of beer on the wall. It's an anonymous folk tune that shows up in the mid-20th century and has yet to be sung to its conclusion, except by Andy Kaufman, and he's an asshole.
He's amazing.
All right, Noah, if you had to summarize what you learned in one sentence, what would it be?
Tom does not fuck around.
That is
Damn right.
true. Are you ready for the quiz?
That I am.
All right, Noah, what's the best name for your medieval brand of chunky beer? Is it A, Mud Light? B, Coors?
It's good. It's very good.
It's spelled wrong, but it still works.
It's got chunks.
Heine? Is it C, Heineken?
What?
No. That's not
The poop
good.
went downhill.
It's not good.
Bring it back.
Fine.
Bring it back.
It's not good. Bring it back with us.
D, Crudweiser?
Lazy.
First,
All right.
first
Peaked at B.
hold
You
on.
peaked at B hard.
It was much lazier earlier. First draft of this had Mudweiser.
Yeah,
I know it
I sent it to him and said,
Much-
"Hey, you realize you
Yeah.
used mud for Bud twice, maybe Crudweiser there."
Do you think Budweiser and Bud Light are different companies, Eli?
I just realized those are very obviously the same company. I Googled beer brands and those were what came up.
Can you name a beer brand besides Bud, Coors, and Heineken?
And Blue Moon.
Too slow.
You literally just named one and I can't remember it. You were mad about it. Because they're orange beer.
Nope.
No.
I actually
No.
said it while he was trying to think
Yeah.
about it.
Orange. Boo.
All right, I'm gonna go
Boo.
with. Hey, Eli, I'm gonna go with D Crudweiser and get you out of this.
Oh, that was correct, dude. You could have said hats. You could have said magic hats. You would have had it.
Oh.
You were close. All right. Next question for you. Which of the following is a true statement about beer? A, in Alaska, it was once illegal to serve beer to a moose
Wait, only once?
B,
It's okay now?
it is no longer on the books as I understand it. I guess it's understood. It's a tacit understanding at this point in Alaska, I'd like to think. Anyway, B, in Ohio, it's legal to serve beer to a fish, but not in excess. You can't get the fish drunk. C,
Can you take its keys?
Where would you put the keys? They're already in the fishbowl. That's
This little castle.
How do you party?
C, in St. Louis, Missouri, it's illegal to sit on a curb and drink beer from a bucket.
Seems like the only way to be in St. Louis.
It feels like a Bill Belichick thing.
Or final option is D. In the Tariki tribe of Kenya, when a young man wants to marry a woman, he offers beer to her. If she then spits some of the beer into his mouth, she has accepted his proposal of
That's
marriage.
a keeper. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, obviously, clearly.
We got to find out now if she's got a friend. That's for sure.
All right, so I'm going to go secret answer E. They're all of the above because I can't have any of these not be true. to be
Well,
honest with you.
okay. I think you have that right. According to the internet, at least if you don't keep checking after the first
there you go.
website,
That's all.
you got that
By
right.
the standards of this show, Eli has said
Absolutely
yes, okay,
correct.
all right.
Yes. All right, Noah. Home brewing is an amazing hobby that lets dudes get together and talk about their A, sterility, B, warts, C, boils, or D, bottom fermenting yeast.
Okay.
I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with secret answer E. All of the above on that one too. I think.
I think you nailed it.
So sly, yeah. Gosh,
Yep.
secret answer day.
All right. I'll come to the defense. Beer is awesome and should be brewed at home. What are some excellent reasons to make this your new hobby? A, it pays for itself if you are an alcoholic who drinks hundreds of bottles of beer a month and if your time has no discernible value.
Yeah, right.
True.
So it does. Thank you.
All right. B, it's a social activity. Your friends will love coming over for an 8-hour day of manual labor as long as you throw in the joy of watching their water boil, commingled with sending them home smelling like a baseball stadium urinal. C, it's safe. The only things to watch for are caustic sanitizing chemicals, broken glass, exploding glass, and many dozens of gallons of heavy boiling water that has to be transported and then cooled. Or D, it's delicious because if you are diligent, you could make a beer a fraction as good as what's available in the store and for only triple the cost.
So true, too.
Don't answer yet.
T is so true. Holy shit. And then you're going to pretend to like it. The worst one is E. You have to pretend to fucking like it, too.
right, like,
I love spending time with Tom's beer.
Yeah, this is great.
I'm going to just reject the premise, Tom.
That is correct. I would imagine.
Yes, and
What
that
is it?
means
Sure.
that
All right.
I'm going to announce Heath as the winner. I don't know
Sure,
why.
why
It's
not?
just true.
Nailed it. All right. Next week, I get to pick who goes. I'm going with Tom. I'm going with Tom
No,
next week.
I'm gonna be so drunk.
And something uplifting. That'll be great. All right. Well, for Tom, Noah, Eli, and Heath, I'm Cecil. Thanking you for hanging out with us today. We'll be back next week. And by then, Tom will be an expert on something else. If you'd like to keep this show going, you can make a per episode donation at patreon.com/citationpod or leave us a 5-star review everywhere you can. And if you'd like to check out our other projects, get in touch with us, listen to past episodes, connect with us on social media, or read the show notes, be sure to check out citationpod.com.
So,
What do you think?
You guys, I'm going to admit this is some refreshing pee.
See?
Right?
Told you.
Are you going to finish that? Or
Yes.
You sure?
Yes.
It's like you knew I was going to ask that.